Hey, everybody. I hope you are doing well. I'm Micah. I'm the pastor at Living Word, and I am here with Crystal Nowak, who is a nurse, or actually, she works in the COVID-19 division. Explain that to us exactly what your role is, Crystal.
Hi, so I am a critical care nurse on the medical intensive care unit. We are a primarily pulmonary ICU, and so for patients that are coming into the health system that are being ruled out for COVID-19, that has a higher potential for needing advanced therapies, potentially an advanced airway, and things of that nature, we are the designated unit to care for those patients, as well as caring for some overflow patients that may be on a general ward.
Okay, so you are on the front line of this COVID-19 thing for sure. Is that right?
Yes. Although I will have to say, I feel as though that those that are working in the emergency department are most definitely on the front lines. I feel like that we are a little bit safer, and that we're more on the, maybe like the second line, but we are there, and yeah.
Okay. Well, my main reason for kind of wanting to ask you some questions today is the my my main purpose is to keep people out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Although there are some things to be concerned about for sure, but there's a difference between concern and just being cautious and fear. And so I want to keep people out of fear. And I think that a lot of times having the facts helps people stay out of fear. A lot of times people want to run from the facts and kind of just bury their head. And I think that actually does more harm than it is good. So I just wanted to have the opportunity to kind of ask you some questions about the virus, what it is, how it's contracted, how it's treated, what people can expect, and those kind of things. So, can you kind of just start off by explaining to us what's the difference between this virus and other viruses? What's the difference? And people have compared it to the flu, right? And so, what is the difference? Why is this such a bigger deal than the flu that comes around every year?
Okay, that is a really great question. So the influenza viruses, there are flu A, flu B. There are lots of different mutations within those. That strain of viruses have been around for a while. And so in the medical community, we know it very well. The scientists are able to kind of predict some changes to them, some mutations and things like that. We have well-developed vaccines for them. And because they've been so well studied and known about, then we have a pretty good treatment plan for them. COVID-19 is new. So it is new to the scientific world, to the medical world. And so things that we don't know about it is what are its rates of mutations? When will it mutate? Things like that. For a while, we didn't really understand or know its transmission rates, those that it tends to have more negative impact on. And it also is just a completely different viral structure than the influenza viruses. It's actually looks like it's a combination of a coronavirus and SARS.
Okay. So now, when you're talking about mutating, so from what I understand, and I'm a novice at this, is that every year when the flu comes back around, it's mutated a little bit, which is why they have to change all the vaccines and stuff like that. So with COVID-19, we're not sure if it mutates. I mean, if and when it comes back around, we're not sure if it'll be the same or different. Is that one of the big concerns?
That is a concern for looking into the future, but for right now, that's not of super high concern. That will definitely take years to study and to see how it develops over the upcoming years.
So we really don't know what we're getting into as far as this particular new virus.
That is correct.
Okay. So how do you contract the virus? I've heard all kinds of things. It's airborne, it's respiratory. I've heard you can get it off of surfaces. You can't get it off of surfaces, really. How do you actually contract? I've also heard that it stays in rooms for long periods of time after somebody has left. Can you kind of shed some light on some of that for us?
Yeah, so in comparison to the normal flu, that is carried and transmitted via droplets. So the virus is on a little droplet of moisture. You cough, you sneeze, it sneezes or coughs out into the air. Another person is nearby, it lands on them, they become infected. Okay. And so it continues. With COVID-19, yes, it can travel on those droplets of air, but even more so when those droplets kind of dissipate, it actually can still stay in the air. And so it is what is considered airborne, which means that it can kind of stay in the airspace around an infected individual for a couple of hours maybe. And so what that does is it really does increase the amount of time that it can infect other people. So it is airborne. Of course, you can also get it via droplets as well. And for the contact surfaces, yes, it can live on hard surfaces for a couple of hours up to a couple of days, depending on the surfaces. However, that is, I think studies recently have shown that that is a far less way that it is transmitted. So should we be washing our hands and minimizing touching our faces, especially in public spaces? Absolutely. But I don't know how. I think people can be just a little more relaxed on that front, instead of like keeping your Amazon packages in your garage for 2 weeks, that type of things. Like that's a little excessive. So yeah.
Okay. And so if somebody were to contract the virus, what are the actual symptoms? So I've heard some different things about the symptoms. Seems like maybe they've changed, or just what we're hearing from people change. What are the actual symptoms? Because it sounded like when it first came out, I was like, oh, well, that's not a big deal. It's a headache and a cough and, that kind of thing. So how hard is this on your body if you contract it?
So it really is actually fairly mild. So just very similar to other respiratory viral illnesses, a cough, maybe a running nose, some sneezing, mild fever. So the symptoms for the vast majority of people really is very mild. If you have someone that tends to be older or immunocompromised, then the symptoms for them could be far more severe in the sense that they can develop respiratory failure and have, which induces a lot of like a big inflammation in your lungs, like a cytokine storm is kind of what it's called in the medical world. And so develop like a viral pneumonia from that, but also it is shown it can infect your upper airway passages and actually like deep in your lower like alveolar air sac spaces. So for those that have pre-existing conditions like heart disease, it seems to really affect those more with heart disease in a negative way if it leads to those severe symptoms. However, 80 to 85% of people have very, very mild symptoms, sometimes so mild, in fact, that they are actually asymptomatic, meaning that they're contagious, but they don't even know that they're really that sick or sick at all. And so that is the reason why it has a higher transmission rate than the flu. The flu has a transmission rate of like one infected person may infect one other person in general. But the COVID-19 can infect up to 3 to 4. So one infected person can infect up to 3 to 4 people, just because your symptoms are actually really mild. You really don't feel that sick. And so you end up unknowingly passing it on to other people just because the symptoms are really that mild.
So that would explain like the social distancing and all of the concern. So, but if a majority of the time the symptoms are relatively mild, and you may even have it and overcome it and not even know it. So why is it such a bigger deal than the flu? I mean, I understand we don't know everything about it, so there's some questions. But as far as when it first came out, there were questions about, well, way more people die of the flu every year that have died from this thing. And so why, if it's so mild, why is it so dangerous?
The transmission rate. So what happens is, so those that are not in the medical community do not feel the impact that the flu has on our healthcare system. Being in the unit where I work from November until April, May, we see people that are dying of the flu, or we're actually fairly good at saving them. But it is months of being in the hospital, being on very, very aggressive and medically advanced therapies in order to save their life, that is then followed up by months of rehab before they're even able to get home and hopefully be able to lead a normal life. So for us in the healthcare community, the flu has always been not so great. And so,
because you get everybody at once too, don't you?
Yes, like we typically stay very, very, very full. And so with this, because it can be transmitted to so many people. So if one person is infected and they inadvertently transmit that to 3 people, and then those three people don't know, then they each transmit it to 3 people. And then those people don't know that they have it, and then they inadvertently to 3 more people. It exponentially increases the cases. And so, of course, the higher number of patients that you have that become sick with this, then the increase in the number of more severe cases that you're going to see. And so with that, our healthcare structure right now is just not capable of taking in the influx of all of the cases that would be needed to be cared for.
It sounds like most, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're great.
Oh, it sounds like most of the cases, even in older or sometimes even people with their immune systems being compromised, are still treatable. But it sounds like with the replication rate that you're talking about, that the hospitals are just going to be inundated all at the same time. Is that kind of the concern?
That is the concern, yes. And so in the healthcare setting, obviously the people that go to the hospital, they're sick and their bodies are already fighting something. So they're already very immunocompromised. So already those patients are at risk. And for patients that are needing aerosol air in order extra air to help them breathe, and to take it. Was that?
Are you talking about respirators?
Well, not even that, like even a supplemental oxygen. Okay. And when you get up to needing a certain amount of supplemental oxygen, you need that to be humidified air to not irritate your lungs and things like that. And so even patients that don't even need a ventilator, they would need to be in negative pressure rooms. These are specialized rooms that have negative pressure in order to help like pressurize out the airborne droplets. Before COVID-19, the only thing that we really needed to use those negative pressure rooms for would people that would have tuberculosis. And so, as we all know, we've had a very great success rate with vaccinations for minimizing the amount of patients that have TB. And so having enough negative pressure rooms is really an issue for having patients that are needing oxygen and then potentially on to needing the ventilator. And so most hospitals don't have enough rooms for that, which means that that for most definitely those that are taking care of them are at increased risk of contracting this and being exposed to this, especially with not having enough PPE, which means personal protective equipment. And so
it's like masks and gloves.
Correct. Most importantly, the N95 masks, because those are what is needed for patients that have a disease that is airborne.
So do they, so let me ask about the masks, because they're saying that masks don't help if you don't already have it. So explain to me why, if I have it, a mask is going to help you get it. But if I have it, a mask on you is not necessarily going to help you. Because that's what I've heard. I'm not sure if that's correct or not.
Yeah. So surgical masks, if you have a viral illness, the infected person wearing a surgical mask will help to keep those droplets in and not going out into the public. So for patients that are sick, them having surgical masks, that's great. The problem comes in with people that are hoarding those supplies for themselves, meaning that those of us that are in the healthcare system that are taking care of not only COVID-19 patients, but also those with the flu, who those masks are helpful for, those that are immunocompromised. There are far more infectious diseases that we as healthcare professionals are exposed to every time that we go to work. And that is important for us in our day-to-day work. But the surgical masks will not keep the COVID-19 particles out, so they are not effective in keeping someone else from contracting it, if that makes sense, unless the infected person is wearing one.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that's awesome. So so that's helpful to know, as far as I don't need to hoard masks. So that's good.
Right.
So there's so the 6 foot, I've heard 3 to 6 feet. I've heard 6 to 10 feet. So when you're talking about an airborne virus, what is the safe space that we need to keep from somebody else?
I believe it's 6 feet. So I think 6 feet is definitely far safer than 3 feet. So that's what I would go with for sure.
Okay. All right. And so you had already mentioned that it can be transmitted not only through like airborne, but also getting something on your hand and touching your eye, nose, mouth, but that is not quite as I guess prominent a way to get it. Is that right?
That is correct. It can live on surfaces for certain surfaces, was double the time that the flu can. So the flu on a hard surface can live up to 24 hours. COVID-19 can live up, they think, up to 48 hours, if not more, on certain surfaces. So the potential is definitely there. But it is spread far more easily through airborne particles.
Yeah. Okay. And like I'm like overly aware of every time I touch my face now. Like I have an itch on my face. Can I scratch it or can I not? Like I was teaching last Sunday and I reached up and rubbed my nose. And like in the chat, there was a chat somewhere that was like, "Oh my gosh, he touched his face." You know,
Don't do that.
so
The great news, though, is that so a virus is they have it's smaller than a bacteria, and there's like a protein and kind of like a little bit of like a, for just using layman's term, like a greasy substance that kind of holds the protein on the outer shell. And as we know, soap works really great on grease. And so wash your hands. And for me and my kids, washing hands does not mean putting some soap on your hands and then rubbing it under the water and let the water rinse off the soap as you're moving your hands around. Like actually, like really lather your hands for 15 to 20 seconds and envision the soap like grabbing hold of the virus, and then the water helping to rinse that away, as opposed to the water rinsing your soap away and also not rinsing away the virus, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
I sang happy birthday while washing my hands more than I ever have in my life, because like that's kind of one of those things is you have to sing happy birthday like twice or something.
Yeah, but don't try to sing it like really fast, because then it's about the time, not the song.
That's funny. I'll try to slow down as I sing happy birthday. I just don't know who to sing happy birthday to. It's confusing. I don't know, but I do it anyway. So I sing it to myself. So there are, on a more somber note, the mortality rate that we've had. I mean, I've been looking at the cases that we've been having, and so it's got that hockey stick that everybody predicted now, where it looks like for the last couple of days it's like doubling every few days, and that's not only the amount of people that contracted it, but also the death rate and the mortality rate. So can you talk to what percentage of do you know what percentage of people are dying at this point from it, and what is the cause of that? Is that because they're overloading the healthcare system? Is it specifically mainly the people with highly compromised immune systems? What's the cause of that, and who needs to be concerned?
Yeah. So this is really where the flatten the curve really comes into play.
And so describe that, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that.
Gotcha. So I am a visual person, so this is what I think of. Imagine having a container that is filled with, what's that stuff? The like the kinetic sand or the modeling sand, or whatever that kids play with. So imagine that represents all of the people that are going to be infected with COVID-19 in our country. So that is all of it over, the next 6 months to a year, whatever, that is all of them. Okay. And so imagine that in a really tall tube, and, so you have all of it. So imagine just squashing that down. What would happen? It would just flatten out on your table surface, right? So, in other words, the number of people would still be the same. However, it would be over a much longer time frame, if that makes sense. So
not as many people have it at the same time.
That is correct, which means that in our healthcare system, we would actually be able to maintain and manage the amount of patients that are coming in with severe cases. What's happening, especially in Italy, so right now their death rate is around like 10%, which is really, really, really high, which is double that of China's rate. So, and most of that has to do with the fact that it's so many people at one time and their healthcare system has just been crushed. And so when that happens, you have facilities that run out of PPE. And then you have a number of nurses and doctors that also get sick and respiratory therapists, because they are on the front lines and they do get sick. And as we know, the infection rate is really high. So one person will infect 3 to 4 people. And so it just continues to snowball. And once it gets to that point, there is a line, literally a line in the sand, where when we go above that for our health systems, then we can't recover at that point in time. It just snowballs so quickly and significantly that it's not only COVID-19 patients where their mortality goes up. We also don't have enough bed space or ventilators for other people that have ARDS from the regular flu or from other things. For those that are immunocompromised, that are septic and needing support. And so it really has a very large snowball effect. And so that's really what plays into it.
Wow. So so it is really the overrunning of the healthcare, not enough beds. Like I was hearing stories of in China that people are literally dying in this line, because there's not enough. And then in Italy, they're trying to figure out, so they only have so much equipment. So they're having to make decisions on who lives and who dies, which is horrible. And so that's what you're trying to prevent by the social distancing and all of this. Now, young people, who are not at risk necessarily for this, and I talked with a lot of young people, or people that are not necessarily going to have a problem themselves if they get it, and so they have a harder time understanding that, well, but I'm not going to hang around with anybody who's elderly or who's compromised, has a compromised immune system. So how is it that those people, not necessarily adhering to the recommendations or the requirements, how is it that they are that they're causing a problem, I guess, is my question.
Gotcha. Well, they're young. They're little young bucks. They have a great immune system, and so they're not going to know that they're really sick, right? So they're not going to feel that bad. They may feel a little meh, maybe they'll forego having Taco Bell that day. Maybe have a little bit of soup and, drink some water instead of having a diet soda pop, and then they'll feel pretty good. Yet they have infected. If they're still going out and about, then they have potentially infected up to 3 to 4 people in one outing. And so that just...
If they don't hang around with anybody who's elderly or has a compromised immune system, what's the danger?
Well, because then you will come across people that, when you're out and about, that lives or takes care of their elderly parents, or is going to go home and take care of their immunocompromised child. And so they have been infected and they're not going to know it, but they already are contagious. And so there is a very direct connection, whether or not they see it or not. There is a very, very real and a very direct connection to it. And it's, there was a graphic that was just so great about, there was a generation of people that at their age that, at 18, 19, they went to war for our country. And, how they're now able to save that generation, that really brave generation, by literally just Netflixing and chill, so just stay home. It's, Like, it's amazing
Don't
that you can
Netflix
save.
chill, but you can chill and then Netflix.
Right, that's true. But yes, but
That's
that
a
you
term
can.
that the kids use nowadays. That's not great.
Yes, yes. But
So
it's
kids don't
amazing.
Netflix and chill.
Right, but you can literally save people's lives. And I know that that sounds really dramatic. I get it. I know that that sounds really dramatic. I hear you. I feel you. But it's true. Like, you really can save people's lives by staying home and, watching a World War II documentary.
There you go. I like that. I love documentaries. So if somebody thinks that they have COVID-19, do they go? What do they do? When do they need to be tested? When do they need to go to the hospital? What's the next move?
Just relax.
Yeah.
If you just have a little fever, if you're feeling a little mucky, just do the normal thing that you would do if you had a virus, if you had the common cold, or if you had the flu. There is no treatment for it right now. They're working on looking at some antivirals and things like that. But for the most part, for any virus, it just kind of, quote unquote, runs its course. So if you are just rest, fluids, definitely keep yourself distant from other members of your family, kind of quarantine yourself in one particular room, and just be very mindful of all of your practices. Maybe just use one bathroom just for you and things like that. But you do not need to go to the hospital. You do not need to go to the emergency department. Please, for the love of all the beautiful kittens and puppies, don't go to the ER if you just feel a little sick. Going to the ER is definitely reserved for if you are experiencing shortness of breath. And the emergency room really needs to be treated for emergencies. So having a fever and feeling a little off of your A game does not constitute as an emergency. And I think that a lot of people are like, oh, but shouldn't I get tested? Like, don't I need to know? The truth is that there's just not enough tests to go around. This is novel. This is new. Yes, things are behind and should be a little bit better, but, we're not going to kind of worry about all that. It's, yes, it is. In the healthcare world, it's nice for us to know the rate of community spread and things like that. But the truth is that right now we just don't have enough testing. And so they really are reserving testing for those that are at high risk, like really high risk populations, or those that have a known positive contact with someone else, or that has traveled recently. And so you don't need to get tested. Your employer doesn't, need to know if you've had it or not. So that is definitely one way that you can help the healthcare system as well, is just, it's okay. Just take care of yourself, fluids, rest, and you'll start to feel better soon.
So mainly if I'm having shortness of breath, a hard time breathing, then at that point I need to go in. But otherwise, I don't need to go in just so I can have a badge that says, hey, I survived COVID-19.
Right.
And actually can maybe hurt somebody else if I do that.
Right. Absolutely. And, so here's the thing, and this is definitely not meant to scare anyone, because it shouldn't be perceived as that way. But this is more than likely going to pass through the vast majority of us. We just kind of want it to pass through us over an extended period of time. So we want to build immunity to it, right? And so the way that you build immunity is to for your body to have an exposure to it. And so that our God-given defense system can mount an attack and be like, oh, I know you. And so we're all going to get it at some point in time within reason, and that's okay. We just don't want to all get it at the same time.
Gotcha. And so that's why I think they've announced that we're having a lockdown in I think actually that'd be tomorrow, but we'll release this tomorrow, so it would be today as you guys are watching this. But so that's the reason for the lockdown, is to kind of try to spread out if it's going to go through, and we're going to overcome it one at a time, but we want that not to be all at the same time.
That is
so that
correct.
the healthcare system doesn't get backed up.
Correct. Yes. And right now, Wake County and Durham County have the highest incident rates of positive cases within North Carolina. And so as of right now, though, I think that is why those two counties are being targeted for the shelter in place.
Gotcha. So once all this passes, and do we have any real idea about how long it'll take to pass through the population?
I do not know the answer to that. I think
that's the question that everybody's asking, which, well, like you said, this is the first time, that we're seeing this, and so nobody has it. Schools are shut down until May, and so nobody really has any idea. Now, I've also just final question. I promise. Actually, I don't promise, but I think is because this is really interesting to me, and I think it's very educational. I think it helps lower the anxiety. I think what you don't know brings anxiety a lot of times. With when you actually have the facts, you can look at the face and go, "Oh, okay." So there are, I've heard people talk about the different. I don't know if there was phases that a lot of times a virus will come and then everything will be okay, and then it'll come back 2 or 3 times. Is that something that we expect from COVID-19, or is it too soon to know that?
I think that is just based on evidence for most viruses, that is kind of how they act and react. But I think that is probably more so for the influenza virus. Not quite sure for this COVID-19, especially since it's a combination of SARS and the coronavirus.
Yeah. So there's a lot of unknowns that come along with that.
Right.
Sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people are nervous of how long will this be the new normal? And oh, please don't let it be so long that it is the new normal. So I mean, I know that the best virologist in the nation is saying that they're hoping to have a vaccine for this, but it would be 18 months from now. That's probably the earliest that it could actually go through all of the safety trials that it would need to fully be developed and to make sure that it is safe. And so, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, so that's going to be a little while off. So, do they know yet if you contract it, have you built up an immunity and you won't contract it again ever, or just contract it again that season, or do they know any of that yet that you know of?
I don't know.
I know they're still studying it, so there's a lot of unknown. So I'm asking a lot of questions.
I think that's hard. And you think like the flu, well, there's so many different variations of the flu. There's flu A, there's flu B, there's and so if you have the flu one year, it may not be the same strain that you had 2 years ago. But for this, I'm not quite sure. I'm honestly not sure.
Yeah, and I think even with the experts, it's a lot of the information is changing continually. As far as they were really concerned about it on surfaces at one point, and now they're kind of saying, be careful, but it's not as big a concern as others. So I think we'll learn more as we go along. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me. And I think this is going to help a lot of people, ease a lot of people's anxiety as well. And so that, we're all quarantined to our homes now. So for us all to just relax and spend some time with our families and make the best of it. But I really appreciate it. Crystal and her husband, Bob, and her beautiful children have been part of the church for years and years. And I just wanted to say thank you for first of all, being on the front line, or as you call it, the second line, but just to be there. And I know this is a crazy time for you. And I just wanted to say thank you. I pray for you every day. And I want to encourage all of our audience to do that as well. And also make Crystal's life easier and everybody else by trying to flatten out, this curve. And yes, please. and obey the recommendations and the requirements that have been asked of us. So anyway, thank you so much, Crystal. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Pastor Micah.
Yep. All right, everybody, have a great day. Talk to you soon.